Hi everyone, here at last is my new Moon in Scorpio video, and I am going to speak, I'm not going to try and speak faster than normal, but what I'm going to avoid doing is, and I'm sorry, I'm getting over a viral infection, it's not COVID, so you will hear it in my voice. But what I'm going to do is rather than, I have a tendency sometimes to say the same thing over and over again in videos so that the message can get incorporated. And I'm going to be much more, I'm going to hit the points and focus on getting through them because there's a lot to say. And I want to avoid the video getting cut off based on the capacity on my iPhone. So that's where we're at. So if it means that you, and I'm not trying to do this to get more views, please understand that. If it means that you have to go back to pick up on things again, you have that option. You're welcome to do so. And as you know, I do my new moon videos after the new moon. Yeah, and I'm going to leave it at that. I'm not going to go into why I do it that way and whether I think it's worth it doing it before or after or whatever it is. So we leave that for another day, shall we? Now, new moon in Scorpio. To my mind, we cannot speak about this new moon in Scorpio without referring to the Mercury retrograde that just happened. And I have my notes here right in front of me. Mercury entered its shadow period on September the 6th. It went retrograde on September the 27th. It went direct on October the 18th. And it cleared the shadow period yesterday on November the 3rd. Okay? Mercury, while it went retrograde, trined Jupiter 3 times, squared Pluto 3 times, as it was going direct, after it went retrograde, and after it went direct again. So, and it opposed Chiron for all intents and purposes twice through the process. It's the square to Pluto that is so important to me. On around November the 1st, a few days ago, it trined Jupiter, and then on November the 2nd, it squared Pluto for the third and final time. This is a long-winded way of saying that when Mercury squares Pluto 3 times like this, somewhere during September, but particularly in October, we might have gained a rising awareness on some sort of an issue that probably requires communication and sorting through and processing and investigating Mercury communication processing related things that had to do with confronting Plutonian themes, power struggles, who has power and control on a certain situation, how are we enmeshed with someone, what is the nature of that enmeshment, psychologically, most importantly, emotionally, just as, slightly less importantly, but also then in terms of its consequence, financially, because that's how these things, when it comes to Pluto and the sign of Scorpio, where this new moon is occurring, is where all of these factors become bedfellows, our emotional patterns, our psychological patterns, and as a consequence of those, our financial patterns. Who are we in bed with? And when we look at the sign of Scorpio, what this new moon is, thematically, literally, figuratively, who are we in psychological, emotional, and financial entanglement with? And what is the nature of those patterns in our lives? And what archetypes and patterns do our emotional, psychological, and financial partners represent? What do they bring to the table, and how do we do this very intricate dance and deal with the consequences of it, and what are we processing, and how far back does this go, and all that kind of stuff. It's a deep enmeshed process, and one that frequently invites themes of intensity and passion and even conflict. Now, there's a dog in the neighborhood that agrees. So the bottom line is, somewhere with these Mercury-Pluto squares, we have come to, as we get to this new moon, it could be that we are either vacillating. It's a little bit like standing at a crossroads, like, which way do I go? Do I stay or do I go? That would be this Mercury square Pluto 3 times, Mercury direct squares Pluto, retrograde squares Pluto, direct squares Pluto. Something gains awareness that brings something to our consciousness with regard to some kind of enmeshed power, emotion, psychological, financial pattern entanglement that we finally, even if we decide to stay, there's a certain truth about that pattern that is now very clear within our psyche. Okay? And themes of empowerment, taking my power back, acting from a place of power, are on top of mind. Sometimes having an awareness about a person or an influence, we may choose to stay because we are cognizant of the dynamic. We may choose to live with that dynamic for a certain period of time longer because we feel like it's the wiser thing to do. Either we are too entangled, or making what seems like a rebellious or an impulsive gesture will lead to a certain kind of loss. And so we decide that with greater awareness, we're going to take our time to sort through this process. In other cases, we may feel like, no, I'm done, I go, I don't stay. So whatever that archetype is for you, depending on where it sits, let me introduce another factor to this. Why is this important to the new moon in Scorpio? The new moon in Scorpio is opposite Uranus in Taurus. And when I say opposite, I mean within a degree. And it is approaching at the time of the new moon. So many people have already addressed this with this new moon, this idea of sudden change, disruption. The emphasis with Uranus is always on the word sudden. And one might think, why when the new moon is opposite Uranus would we place so much emphasis on Uranus and Uranian themes when the new moon is opposing Uranus? You wouldn't think that they would work together. You would think that they would work kind of opposite each other. Why is it that the way in which this new moon is being described is kind of like the sun conjuncting Uranus or a new moon conjuncting Uranus? That's when you would think Uranian themes would expand or explode. Well, when the sun is opposite a planet, just like when the sun is opposite the moon, you have a full moon. When the sun is opposite a planet, you kind of have a full planet. At the time of this new moon, because the sun and the moon are together, and the sun is opposite Uranus, you have a full Uranus. Uranus gets all of the sun's light. It is lit up. It is full. And so Uranus's influence is going to be very strongly felt. And with Uranus, the themes of personal authenticity. And consequently, the way we process that would be things like liberation, rebellion, independence. Uranus is in Taurus. The new moon is in Scorpio. The themes of codependency, Scorpio, independence, Taurus, are thematically pronounced. Now, irrespective of whatever it is that's going on with this opposition, the theme of codependency and examining it would be relevant now anyway, because we have planets going through Scorpio, we have the new moon in Scorpio, and so scorpionic themes, it's just a time of the year when we would be looking at codependencies and enmeshments and power struggles and psychological patterns and emotional patterns when it comes to close personal relationships or entangled personal relationships. They don't have to be close. You can all of a sudden find yourself entangled with someone you have never met, or you could be dealing with very scorpionic. You could be dealing with an inheritance or a legacy issue, and all of a sudden some relative you all of a sudden in partnership with or having to deal with when you've never really interacted with that. People find themselves in very strange entanglements, and they can be very scorpionic, very Plutonian in this regard. Taurus is a sign fundamentally of independent abundance. And so this conflict, this theme is definitely very pronounced. With Uranus in Taurus being full at the moment with this new moon, there's no question that whatever has been processed over the past 2 or 3 weeks, there will be a bid for greater authenticity. So the disruption may very well be disrupting a pattern that has been in place as a result of a certain amount of reflection over the past 3 or 4 weeks that allows you to make a seemingly sudden or disruptive decision. I don't think it's really that sudden or that disruptive. I think it's been brewing for a while. But it is going to lead you towards something that is authentic on your part, and you feel it in your bones as that authenticity. So it might seem rebellious, it might seem disorderly, it might seem teenage, it might seem disruptive. All those kinds of things change. As we've been talking about for a long time, when you look at Uranus in the sky, you can't ignore the Saturn-Uranus square, which is going to become thematically more and more important as the last 2 months of this year continue to roll by, because there's a final Saturn-Uranus square in December. And remember that so much of the second half of this year is about tying up themes and issues from the past so that you can enter this portal into the future. The portal into the future is really defined and announced by the full moon 2 weeks from today, which is a lunar eclipse in Taurus, where Uranus is. So whatever is being kicked off now has some sort of relationship with this eclipse. Now, the week of September 19th, week before, week after, is important for this full moon lunar eclipse in Taurus on November 19th. And you will see, it may not make sense to you right now, but some of the themes and the decisions that you're dealing with are going to somehow bear fruit or become clearer, or missing parts of the puzzle will start to make sense as you head towards this full moon lunar eclipse 2 weeks from now. In many respects, this new moon in Scorpio is about the eclipse 2 weeks from now, because it is opposite Uranus and Taurus. The full moon is not going to be opposite Uranus. It's going to be a little further from Uranus. But we cannot talk about the Taurus eclipses without talking about the fact that there's a Uranus transit in Taurus. You just can't, because the Taurus eclipses automatically are in conversation with Uranus and Taurus, and wherever Taurus sits in your chart, whatever house it occupies, whatever that house stands for, there is a movement towards greater authenticity and liberation in that part of your chart, period. And that authenticity and movement and quantum leaps and epiphanies in evolution are dependent on, remember, are dependent on ensuring that you act in your best interest wherever the sign of Aquarius sits in your chart, because Saturn in Aquarius is squaring Uranus in Taurus, and it's moving towards that over the next couple of months. I'm going to keep developing this. And when it comes to the eclipse on November the 19th and the Sagittarius solar eclipse on December the 4th, the Saturn-Uranus square is a major theme in both of those eclipses. So, the two other things I like to talk about with my new moon and full moon videos, the most important aspect from my perspective at the time of this new moon is Mars squaring Saturn. Mars in Scorpio, where the new moon is, squaring Saturn in Aquarius. We've just talked about Saturn in Aquarius moving towards squaring Uranus, right? The idea of acting in your best interests, not falling into the path of least resistance, and being aware of behaviors and patterns that have not been in your best interest wherever Aquarius sits in your chart, and doing the due diligence and the disciplined work that might go contrary to the instincts that you've had in place, but work better for your self-interest wherever Aquarius sits in your chart, what part of the chart that occupies and what that house stands for. That's where discipline and lines need to be drawn. Jupiter is also in Aquarius right now in that part of the chart, ending a 12-year cycle and starting a 12-year cycle. So we want that ending and that beginning to be auspicious and to be on a strong and solid foundation. The Mars square Saturn occurs on November the 10th, and strangely enough, actually on that day, both Mars square Saturn and Mercury square Saturn. So November the 10th, Mars and Mercury together in Scorpio squaring Saturn and Uranus. Immediately, things that come to mind are strong words, Mars and Mercury are together. Arguments, furthering your goals and your boundaries through communication. Um, could be temper tantrums. Excuse me. Could be um, verbal conflict, written conflict, whatever that looks like. When Mars squares Saturn, there's some action that needs to be taken, either towards pursuing your goals or establishing boundaries. Wherever Scorpio sits in your chart, what house it occupies and what that house stands for, that is actually going to, if the right action is taken with Mars, it's going to contribute to what Saturn is trying to do in terms of establishing the right boundaries and encouraging you to take the actions that are in your best interests where Aquarius is in your chart. Okay? New moon is in the sign of Scorpio. Where does Scorpio sit in your chart? What house does that occupy? What does that house stand for? The next 4 weeks, we're going to be dealing with issues related to that part of the chart, not least in the least because Mars is already there and is going to be there for this 4-week cycle that starts today, and Mercury enters Scorpio tomorrow. Mercury, which has been retrograde in Libra, squared Pluto 3 times, Pluto being one of the rulers of Scorpio, comes into Scorpio conveniently tomorrow after brewing for about 3 weeks some sort of issue related to our power. We come right into this new moon in Scorpio, which is opposite Uranus and Taurus. Even if you don't know your chart thematically, codependencies and enmeshed relationships versus independence, the theme for the next 4 weeks. Okay? Uranus and Taurus. Where does Taurus sit in your chart? What house does it occupy? What does that house stand for? Something is trying to become more personal, more authentic, more liberated, greater epiphanies, greater understanding on your side in that part of the chart, greater alignment, and something about whatever's been brewing from a power dynamic perspective may lead you to make decisions and take actions that feel sudden and disruptive but have been brewing for a while. But this might give you the impetus to take that step, even if you decide not to take that step. So if you decide to, should I stay, and stay as opposed to should I go, it very well could be that you do it simply because you're buying yourself more time. And I'll be really curious to know by the time you have the eclipse in Taurus 2 weeks from now, where it is that you stand on those issues, or what more we learn as things start to escalate. Do not be surprised if the time before the new moon, which was about 2:15 p.m. Pacific time today, November the 4th, if the 24 to 48 hours were just dead and flat and you wanted to nap and you wanted to be in bed and hard to get things done, the energies, right after new moon, even within 48 hours, the energy just returns. It's like the wind coming in behind your sails. The other important transit occurring right now is Mars getting ready to square Saturn on November the 10th along with Mercury. And there's some action that needs to be taken between Mars and Mercury, wherever Scorpio sits in your chart, that is going to benefit and free and allow Saturn to put the right boundaries and take the right actions where Aquarius sits in your chart. So having an awareness of these squaring houses. Where does Scorpio sit? Which house? What does that stand for? Where does Taurus sit? Which house? What does that house stand for? Where does Aquarius sit? What does that house stand for? Will give you a sense of coordinates around this. And yes, Mercury was retrograde in Libra, Pluto in Capricorn. So somewhere this Mercury-Pluto square is absolutely feeding into, like a river coming into this kind of scorpionic ocean, is feeding and bringing information and action into it. And whatever's going on with Mercury-Pluto is only part of the story. It's only part of the story. The larger part of the story is what's going on in Taurus. Because you have a full Uranus at the time of this moon, and in 2 weeks' time you have an eclipse there. This new moon is about that eclipse. And the river is just flowing into this kind of eclipsy ocean, bringing kind of let's just say that it's bringing an awareness of what needs to change. If the second half of this year is about moving towards a future and leaving things in the past, somewhere disruption has to occur to move us. It's like train tracks. Somewhere the train tracks have to start to change so that the train can start to get onto the new train tracks. We are still dealing with the past till the middle of December, though. And with Mars squaring Saturn, that is very much the case here. Now, Scorpio is ruled by Pluto and Mars. Mars is in Scorpio. It's in a sign that it rules. Pluto is in Capricorn. Capricorn is ruled by Saturn. So the Mars-Saturn square, the dispositor of the chart, Saturn, as well as Mars, are both, the Mars-Saturn square is really important. So what action needs to be taken either to pursue a goal where Scorpio sits in your chart or to put up a boundary that is going to benefit Saturn and allow Saturn to do what it needs to do to put the right kind of boundaries in place where Aquarius sits in your chart so that Uranus and Taurus can continue to move towards greater freedom, authenticity, and expansion. That's where we're at. I will leave it at that. I got through everything. Feel free to listen to it again if you need to. And yes, some of the actions taken by us over the next 4 weeks, but especially in the next 24, 48 hours, week, we can, with Uranus, it feels like lightning striking. But it's been going on this has been brewing for a while. Choices that get made. And there's more to shift. There's more to shift. So do your best in terms of making the choices that you feel work for you, based on your wisdom and your appetite for insecurity. I can't really recommend that anyone do anything rash. So be wise. But with Uranus and authenticity, be careful also and weigh what you feel you need to weigh in order to take the steps you need to take. But the fundamental truth that has been exposed to you with regard to whether the horse you're sitting on is dead or alive, should you stay or should you go, that is already clear to you. And it's a matter of time. It is a matter of time. It is a matter of time. So do you rush the process, or do you just acknowledge that the bid for independence is already clear, and do you move towards that and just wait and see how and where things take you? Venus gets ready to get retrograde in Capricorn at the end of this year, and Venus enters Capricorn tomorrow. So that is another important development in this story. So remember, we're going to enter a period of time in late December and in January where, especially financially and relationship-wise, we will be tighter, conserving more, making priorities. So just have that in mind as you do and deal with your decision-making, okay? Share, like, subscribe to my YouTube channel, click on the bell icon next to the subscribe button to be notified whenever I do new videos, and I will leave it at that. If you have any questions, my email address, I think, is going to be in the description area, so I will leave that there. All right, till the next video. Thanks for your patience.